Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Veterinary Business Podcast, your ultimate resource for developing a successful veterinary practice and career. I am Naren Arulrajah, the founder of the Veterinary Business Podcast and one of the co-hosts. On this podcast, we bring you insights and expertise from industry-leading doctors, experts, and thought leaders. We cover a wide range of topics, including practice management, marketing strategies, leadership development, HR best practices, and much more. Whether you are a practicing veterinarian, a practice owner, a practice manager, or a student studying to be a veterinarian, this podcast is tailored to help you navigate the unique challenges and opportunities in the business of veterinary medicine. Every listener of this podcast is welcome to visit veterinarybusinessinstitute.com for additional resources and tools to support your growth. And remember, you can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and other popular podcast platforms. Today, I'm excited to talk to Dr. Mary Holowaychuk, who is the CEO and founder of Reviving Veterinary Medicine, and also she's a consultant, content provider, and medical advisory board member for the vets. And the topic we're going to be talking about today is burnout prevention among veterinary professionals. Burnout prevention among veterinary professionals. We are going to, of course, talk about mental health. Dr. Holowaychuk had a personal experience which led her to start her own podcast literally 3 years ago. So we're going to talk about all that. So let's jump in. Before we get started, Doctor, can you take a minute to kind of tell us about yourself? Who are you? How did you even get into veterinary medicine? Let's start at the beginning.
Sure, it's a great question, and please feel welcome to call me Marie. I grew up with two veterinarians as parents, and so I was immersed in the veterinary profession at a very young age. My mom owned a companion animal practice, and she practiced there for more than 40 years. And so I spent a lot of time in the practice growing up. My dad was in regulatory medicine, so he worked for the provincial and federal governments around food safety and animal welfare. But I knew working in my mom's practice from a young age that I was really taken by the veterinary profession. I loved getting to interact with clients, getting to take care of animals, getting to challenge myself with cases and figuring things out. And so that was where I got started. I got into veterinary school and began when I was 20 years old. So I started from a pretty young age. And I went to the same veterinary school that my parents met and got married at in Saskatoon, not far from where I grew up, outside of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And then after my veterinary school was completed, I did an internship at Washington State University in small animal medicine and surgery. And from there, I developed my passion for emergency and critical care, which led me to do a residency at North Carolina State University in emergency and critical care. And then my path kind of took a big full circle turn. I ended up in academia for 5 years, just really nourishing my love of teaching and research and clinical practice and the variability that comes with academia. But I did get burnt out, and I ended up leaving that role back at the end of 2013. And since the beginning of 2014, it's been 10 years now, I have been living closer to home. I live in Calgary, Canada, and working as a locum emergency and critical care specialist, so a relief specialist, and predominantly as an advocate for mental health and well-being in the veterinary profession.
That's brilliant. So you had something that happened to you personally that made you take mental health seriously. Do you think like what you experienced is normal in the veterinary profession, and what do you think causes it? Or maybe it's not.
Yeah, so I experienced burnout when I was in academia. Realistically, I probably experienced burnout before that a few times. I know as I was nearing the end of my internship, I was starting to become really frustrated and jaded and cynical and emotionally exhausted. And we know that these are often symptoms of burnout that we see amongst veterinarians and other members of the team. And, it kind of subsided for a bit, and then it crept up a little bit again during my residency. And then I didn't get much of a break between vet school to internship to residency to faculty member. And it was a really steep learning curve in my job as faculty in academia, and a lot of pressure, to get research grants and to have graduate students and to mentor residents and interns. And I put a lot of that pressure on myself. A lot of it was driven by my own perfectionism and workaholism. But the long and the short of it is that I experienced pretty significant burnout, which I didn't realize at the time. I just thought, I'm not cut out for vet medicine. I'm not cut out for academia, at least. Maybe something else in vet med, but not academia, which led me to leave. And then when I left and I was working for myself as a locum relief specialist and as a speaker and educator, I became burnt out again because, as many of us know, entrepreneurs and business owners are also really at high risk of burnout. So I don't believe this experience is unique to me. The research would suggest that anywhere between a third to more than a half of veterinary team members are experiencing burnout. And I think many individuals like me just have this sense of, I guess I'm not cut out for vet medicine, and aren't really sure what's happening or what to do about it.
Yeah, I just want to kind of go a little bit deeper. Can you define burnout? I'm assuming you've studied this topic quite a bit. What is burnout, and how do you know that you're burnt out? Is there like anything that just like any symptoms or anything you should look out for if people are listening to this?
Yes, definitely. So burnout is experience that is brought on by chronic workplace stress. So individuals arguably could experience burnout that is not work-related, but certainly the World Health Organization defines it around workplace-related stress. And the symptoms that you would see really are a little bit variable and depend on, what scoring system you use or what research you read. But the most highly regarded research is around the Maslach burnout inventory, which would characterize three main symptoms of burnout. The first being emotional exhaustion. So that feeling of either, serious physical exhaustion, like you think you just physically cannot keep going with your work, or that emotional exhaustion, that emptiness when it comes to dealing with anything emotionally tied to the work that you do. The second symptom is cynicism. So this is, that standoffishness, or I'm trying to think of another word. One of the other words that is often used to describe it is called depersonalization. So it's a little bit of a distancing from our patients, our clients, and our team. And then the third symptom is a low sense of professional accomplishment or professional efficacy, where we just feel like, it doesn't matter how hard I work or what I do, I'm just not accomplishing anything worthwhile on the job. So those would be the three main symptoms that individuals would want to look out for.
Right. And you're saying it starts with stress related to work, right? And
Yeah,
that's kind of
so
what causes it.
yeah, there's a lot of different variables that are believed to impact it, but it is by definition related to chronic workplace stress that goes unchecked or unchanged. So in the context of veterinary medicine, this could be a really exhaustive workload. It could be functioning with low staffing levels for a long period of time. It could be dealing with a caseload that doesn't feel very challenging or that feels too challenging. It can be one or the other. It can be working for an organization where you don't feel that alignment, you don't feel that your values are congruent with each other, feeling not appreciated or not rewarded on the job. There's so many different factors at play. I think the biggest ones that we're seeing in vet med right now are the low staffing levels and the high caseload that many are experiencing.
Right. Right. Have you personally experienced or witnessed the impact of mental health challenges within the veterinary community? Let's say a small animal practice or just the community at large. And if so, how did it influence your perspective on the importance of addressing these issues?
Yeah, so I think I certainly have experienced it firsthand for myself. And the more that I speak to other colleagues, within my programs or with my coaching or just out speaking at conferences and getting to interact with individuals all over the world, essentially, everyone is sharing this similar experience. They're feeling very challenged from a mental health and wellness perspective. There's a tremendous amount of overlap between burnout and mental health problems, specifically burnout and anxiety. So especially in the more chronic stages of burnout, a lot of individuals will feel concurrent mental health challenges. I think, this is all compounded by the fact that we've just lived through a pandemic for several years. And so everybody, regardless of being in the vet profession, is feeling challenged from their mental health with regards to those ramifications. And yeah, veterinary medicine is a profession that has some challenges that are specific and unique to it as well. So in addition to all of the struggles that all human beings face, whether they be challenges with their job satisfaction or challenges with finances or challenges with relationships or family, we also have that extra pressure of having to navigate our clients in a fee-for-service industry. We have access to euthanasia, or the option to do euthanasia, which can lead in some circumstances to moral stress or added psychological distress when things don't go the way we hope them to. And, so there are some inherent challenges unique to our profession and veterinary medicine as a whole that I think add to it. But again, I don't think I can stress enough that I think everyone is feeling mentally challenged in certain ways, given what we've been through over the past several years.
Right. Now, again, I'm just going a little bit, based on our conversation so far. Like you said, at least in your case, it sounded like this was kind of created by you, in the sense you went into academia and you created a heavy workload, and then you became an entrepreneur. And again, that created stress. And so is this something you're seeing with maybe the younger generations, not of course the baby boomers, but Gen Y, in other words, I don't know,
Mhm.
like I guess our parents, they were happy buying a house and a car, and like that was good life, right? Like here we don't have any struggles when we were growing up, and so we
Mhm.
need to kind of overachieve. And I don't know, where do you think this is coming from? Is this something, maybe I'm just totally crazy nutty question, but like just because I'm sure you've thought about this, so that I would love to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I love the question. And I want to be careful not to, offend anybody with generalizations about generational differences. I think we know the most about a generation once they've hit the stage of retirement. So we're still learning a lot about Gen Y, Gen Z, et cetera, et cetera. That said, I think that veterinary medicine has changed dramatically in the last several decades, and probably the most ever just within the last few years. I think back to when I was little and my mom ran her veterinary practice. Times were so much simpler then. There were not electronic medical records. There was no social media. There was no Google or Yelp reviews. Things were just very simplified to the appointments that you could fit in your appointment book that was written by hand. And, maybe the sporadic walk-in, depending on how the day was going. And then at the end of the day, there was the emergency practice that all of the veterinarians contributed to, that all of their patients went to. And then in the mornings, they took their patients back again. Even specialty medicine at that time was just a very, very early growing phenomenon. And, fast forward now today, and we have all of these extra added pressures. So there's more knowledge now that our younger generations are required to know than ever before. There's added technologies. There's added burden of technology in terms of access to veterinarians, by way of cell phones and email and Facebook and other forms of social media. So I do think that there is a tremendous pressure that is being placed on veterinary team members that we didn't experience before. And, from a generational perspective, I think that, the baby boomers were a generation that really thrived or wanted to work very, very hard with a focus on advancement in their careers and really embracing their job for the decades that they were within it and so on. When you move down into Generation X, that really shifted. There started to be more of like well, I saw how my parents struggled and they never had time for themselves. And they built up a wonderful life for themselves, very often out of nothing. But all they did was work. I hardly saw them and we didn't do much together as a family. So a little bit of shift away from that. And that shift seems to be continuing as we move down into the younger generations. And so I think that also is adding, perhaps an extra, I don't want to say burden on the veterinary profession, but there is this movement away from working 6 to 7 days a week, 8 to 10 to 12-hour days, to a more reasonable workload, especially in light of the pressures of veterinary practice, which is also, I think, I don't want to say that that's the result, the result of that is the staffing shortages, but all of these shifts are just things that the veterinary profession is having to, to adjust to. From a mental health perspective specifically, there is evidence to demonstrate that younger generations are experiencing mental health challenges more than the preceding generations did. We don't really know why that is. That could be a societal shift. Again, the exposure. When I was young, I didn't watch the news. I barely listened to the news, and there wasn't social media. So I wasn't exposed to all the news feeds that children and young adults are exposed to today, which no doubt if I had been exposed to those, I would experience higher levels of anxiety as well. So it's a very nuanced conversation.
Yeah.
Hard to make broad generalizations, but there's a lot to think about there.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I was just reflecting on what you said. I bet your mom didn't have to worry about Google reviews, right? Probably
No.
Google reviews didn't exist back then.
No, I
But
mean,
like
you
now there's
definitely
so
worried
many
about,
things you have to worry about, right? Like
yeah. You
just,
worried about word of mouth because there was still that, and so
yeah,
referral was always, your best way of getting clients. And, you still wanted to have a good reputation and so on. But it was just, I was actually lamenting with my mom over the holidays. It seemed like veterinary practice was so much simpler then.
simpler.
It
Yeah,
was
yeah,
just, and not to diminish the incredible work that my mom did. I mean, she was a very successful business owner, an incredible veterinarian. Her clients loved her. She was a magnificent surgeon, so there's all of that. And it was at a very different time. And we're just seeing a lot of change in our profession, especially in the last 5 to 10 years.
yeah. This is, I'm sure I can talk to you for hours and hours on this topic. This is such a fascinating topic. What are some common signs of mental health struggles? I know you kind of touched on it already, or burnout among veterinary professionals, and how can colleagues or employees? So let's say I'm the owner of a practice and I'm noticing, what should I be looking out for in my team? Because you see, or even a colleague, and you want to look what can you look out in others to make sure they're okay.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you asked that, because I think that we have a tendency as human beings, especially in this, post-pandemic world where everybody seems to be a little bit more heightened emotionally, a little bit more standoffish, a little bit less patient with each other. I think we can come into work some days and we can see a team member who seems frustrated, who seems like they don't want to be there. They're a bit resentful. Maybe they're dodging cases. They're like, oh, I don't want to deal with another XYZ owner. And we can jump to the conclusion that they're just, cranky, and, that we don't like to work with them anymore, and, make it about them as a person rather than them potentially experiencing a problem. And so what I would encourage practice owners, managers, team members to do is, when you see a team member that is behaving in a way that is not typical for them, it's not characteristic for them to snap at somebody, or to chronically show up late for work, or to dodge cases, or to, just seem really cynical when it comes to their job, to have a conversation with them, to ask them if they're okay, to share what you've noticed, to open up a discussion for whatever might be troubling them, and not to be the one that has to fix it, because that wouldn't be your job, but to share with them resources, whether those are resources that have helped you personally, whether those are resources that your practice or your veterinary medical organization has available, but to, listen, not judge, hear them out, express empathy, that they are going through something challenging, and direct them to resources that may be of benefit to them. Because I think too often, again, we're sort of rolling our eyes, like, oh, I can't stand working with that person anymore, rather than taking a step back and thinking, wow, this is really behavior that is not like them. I'm worried that something might be going on, and I'm going to have a human to human, heart to heart with them to make sure that they're okay.
So really just being concerned, right? Just saying, hey, I just want to make sure you're okay. Just like letting them, even just l- giving them a place to talk to, right? Because a lot of times, I think it, like you said, it's very isolating since COVID. So we just even more isolated. So you just, and that kind of makes it even worse, as opposed to just being able to talk to a friend and just letting it all out, and somebody listening to you kind of takes the load off or takes the stress off, right? So
I agree, and I think, building off of your point, I think we've created a culture in veterinary medicine where we don't need help. We're the caregivers. And the culture is to just pull up your bootstraps and get the work done, no matter how hard it is. And people can feel very ashamed that they're struggling, and they might feel embarrassed to reach out or to tell anybody. Or they might be looking around and thinking, well, everybody looks like they're doing okay. What's wrong with me? Which was my experience when I was in academia. I was like, I don't hear anybody else complaining. They all seem to be doing well. So clearly I'm the one that's not cut out for this, because this doesn't feel sustainable to me. So I think opening up that conversation, not with judgment, and even better, if you have the comfort in sharing your own struggle or your own story, not, of course, making it about you in
right.
light of their struggle, but just to say, I also struggled, especially during the pandemic, with the sorts of feelings that you're describing. This is what helped me. I wonder, if that's something that might help you as well. And again, we don't want to prescribe or diagnose or push anything on anybody. The best thing that we can do, as you said, is to be considerate and to just be open and honest in what we are experiencing as well, to normalize what the other person's difficult experience might be.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the next question. This is kind of very personal to me and something that I'm struggling with. I'm 48. My two daughters, one is 21, one is 18. And I kind of saw myself as the caregiver. So just working, working, working. And I guess work was my escape. And that was my excuse just to kind of, oh, I'm busy providing for everybody, right? That's my story. But now that story doesn't exist anymore. Like kids are gone and they don't need me. And both my parents passed away. So I don't have to take care of them.
Yeah.
So, but I guess I ignored myself. And I don't know if that's just true for most people or I was just unique and I didn't really, like always me went to the bottom of the list, right? Like, oh yeah, yeah, I need to work out, but oh well, I have client meetings or always
Mhm.
like me was a vacation. Oh yeah, yeah, it's client, some excuse or the other, like, oh, we can't do it. We always found the reason. So this idea of like engineering my own life to kind of make sure it's the life that I want, but I'm also happy about the life as opposed to just see myself as a person doing a job or doing a duty, whether it's with your family or so that has been kind of challenging for me. So I guess the
Mhm.
question is this idea of maintaining a healthy life, and of
Mhm.
course work life, and I know we keep using the word balance, but just how do you create that healthy life, and
Mhm.
especially just in general, even though I work with a lot of veterinary practices and I have a pet and I know a lot about the industry. I'm not in the profession. So just in general and also for people in the veterinary profession, like how do you think about this? And I guess having gone through what you've gone through, I'm assuming these are things you have thought about and done something about in your own life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm on the other end of the spectrum as you. I'm in my 40s as well, but I have a 3-year-old at home. So I feel like I have a long road ahead until I catch much of a break. But nevertheless, I'm not complaining. I'm very grateful to have her in my life. And it's so interesting with these seasons of our life and these, what's the word I'm looking for, transitions into different stages. Our needs and our abilities, especially when they refer to self-care or work-life balance are going to be very, very different. When I was without child, without partner, without anything, earlier in my career, I had the flexibility to really dedicate myself to building my career, to working longer hours, to carving out that time in the evenings to go to the gym and to do whatever else it was that I wanted to do to take care of myself. And then moving into motherhood, my time for myself became so much smaller, as you said, being a caregiver to these other humans in our lives. And so we have to work with that. We have to modify that. And this whole idea of work-life balance, I want to make sure that everybody who's listening recognizes there's no pressure here to feel as though you are perfectly balancing everything. That is, that you have a perfect amount of life, personal, family time compared to work time. That's not really the goal. The goal is to recognize what you need to both thrive and enjoy the love you do, and also find joy in your life outside of work. And so most of us, we get a feeling of imbalance when we're spending a lot of time at work and we don't want to be there. We're like, I'm done. This is enough. I feel like I've clocked enough hours for this week and I want to be at home. That's maybe an indication to set some boundaries with work and to scale back a little bit. The flip side is if we might be having a lot of time at home for ourselves and we might be feeling a little bit fidgety and wanting to get back to work to, contribute to the veterinary profession again. And so just recognizing those signs and cues and working within those. From the perspective specifically of taking care of ourselves, especially in terms of preventing burnout, I think that there's a few key strategies that people want to consider. I think one of those for sure is this idea of work-life separation. So we all benefit, and the research shows certainly in human healthcare as well, from having time within our days and our weeks that we are not doing or thinking about work, that we can completely shut things off when we are not on call, when we are not checking work email, when we are not thinking about cases, when we are not completing medical records. So making sure that we structure our days and our weeks to allow for that. This often requires boundaries, which is also very helpful for that sense of balance and that opportunity to engage in self-care. When it comes to engaging in self-care, there's certainly particular strategies that are of benefit from a burnout prevention standpoint. Things like prioritizing sleep, practicing mindfulness, connecting with a mental health professional when you feel that you are challenged in that way, managing your workload or having conversations with your employer to make sure that your workload and your caseload are managed appropriately. I mean, there's so many different things. I'm focusing on the things that the individuals have control over rather than the systems that are in place. I would say for me, my burnout prevention strategies are really focused mostly on what I've shared already, which is making sure I'm getting enough sleep. I'm adhering to my needs and my limits by setting those boundaries. I'm carving out time every day for self-care in the form of exercise and meditation. And then I'm taking care of myself on a holistic level by, seeing my doctor when I'm sick and connecting with my mental health professional and, doing all those sorts of things. So the key point here is that my plan is not going to be everybody's plan. You have to find a plan that works for you.
Right. But you have to have a plan, right? You have to think about this. If you don't, you just like I used to do, oh, it's an afterthought, then you're going to get burnt out.
100%.
Yeah. There can be a stigma surrounding mental health in many professions. How can the veterinary community work to reduce the stigma and encourage professionals to seek help? I think that's a good question, because a lot of people, I think, they think there's something wrong with them if they talk about mental health issues or whatever. So they don't even want to talk about it. They don't want to even bring it out. They just suffer in silence. Mm-hmm. So how can this be turned around?
Yeah, so this is definitely something that's been documented in the veterinary space. We know based on surveys done, surveying veterinarians, that there is a higher tendency to demonstrate that stigma with regards to mental health compared to the general population, especially a stigma with regards to social support, the belief that people will be kind and caring towards an individual if they disclose they have a mental illness. So I think that brings up this fear of disclosure. I think that's a very nuanced fear, because the fear can be not just, will people support me or what will people think of me, but what could happen to my license? Will I be able to practice medicine? So it's very challenging. And we do tend to see stigma very commonly amongst high achieving professionals. We also tend to see it more so as well amongst minorities or marginalized populations, as well as amongst men compared to women in certain circumstances. So again, I think it goes back to that, power through. Don't tell anybody that you're struggling, pull up your bootstraps and just get through it. So what we can do as a profession to shift stigma is, number one, to have open conversations about mental health. I speak to so many people in veterinary practice that know that a team member has a history of a mental illness. They've shared it. They've talked about it openly, and they say to me, but I can't ask them about their mental illness. Like, that would not be okay. And I say, why wouldn't it be okay? If someone told you that they were having a back problem and they were going to physio 2 times a week, you would say, how's your back been? How's physio coming along? We have this perception that mental health, again, it's a stigma, that nobody talks about it. You can ask a person, how's your depression been? How's your counseling coming along? How's your anxiety been? Have you been having less panic attacks? Like, these are okay conversations to have. To be respectful, you may want to have those conversations in private and not at your weekly staff meeting. So making sure, just like I probably wouldn't want my physical health problems broadcast to everybody, mental health is the same. But in general terms, any way that you approach a physical health problem, you approach a mental health problem or conversation the exact same way. I think another way that we can reduce stigma is to learn more about it. There's a lot of myths and misconceptions out there around mental health and mental illness specifically. So taking a mental health first aid program, taking a psychological first aid program, like engaging in these programs and resources that help to dispel some of the myths and misconceptions when it comes to mental health and wellness. I think those are two of the biggest things really that we can do, as well as watching our language. That would probably be the third thing that I would recommend. So when I say that, what I mean is that trying to avoid stigmatized language, such as a person is an addict, rather than a person has a substance use problem, or to use phrases, I hear a lot of people say, oh, I'm so OCD, or that person is manic. People live with obsessive compulsive disorders that are debilitating. People live with bipolar disorder that causes episodes of mania, but we would never refer to a person as OCD or as manic. When we use language like that, it's very derogatory, and it's very it's very hurtful and potentially harmful to the people that are struggling. So those would be the key recommendations I would have.
Thank you. In your experience, what kind of support systems or resources are most effective in helping veterinary professionals cope with stress, anxiety, and burnout?
Yeah, so, I think definitely I go back to my previous suggestion, which was to seek help, to seek professional help. I think there's a reason why more and more practices and organizations in the veterinary space are investing in mental health resources, whether it is having a social worker on the team, whether it is having benefits that have comprehensive mental health coverage, or offering mental health benefits, within the practice or within the programming. I think it's really, really important to take advantage of those resources. There is a lot of evidence to demonstrate that people with mental health problems most of the time get better and they go on to live totally normal lives. So to not feel that treatment is not going to be effective or that talking to someone won't be helpful, but to really engage in those resources and utilize them. I think that is first and foremost. I think additionally, I mentioned some of the other tools that I use. There's a lot of evidence to demonstrate the benefits of regular exercise for mental health, with good night's sleep for mental health. So prioritizing some of those things in addition to other ancillary strategies or tools such as mindfulness and conflict resolution, other things that we can do to mitigate some of the things that can wreak havoc on our mental health.
This is a really, really awesome conversation. As we wrap up, my last question to you is, what changes or improvements do you hope to see in the veterinary profession concerning mental health awareness, support, and overall well-being?
Mm-hmm. I would love for us to shift into a world where stigma does not exist in our profession anymore, that we can really speak openly about it. I would really like every veterinary professional to have access to a mental health resource or a mental health professional that is supplemented, that is, part of their salary or part of part of their benefits package. And I would like our culture to change a little bit. I think we do have a culture that is really promoting working very, very hard and oftentimes sacrificing ourselves, for the good of others. And while I'm all for helping my patients and connecting with my clients and looking after my team, I think we have to remember that if we are not looking after ourselves, we can't do any of those other things. So really giving ourselves permission, if we need to take time to step away from work to go to a mental health appointment or take a mental health day to look after ourselves, that we will do that. And when we are in a management or ownership role, that we will give permission to our team members to do the same, so that nobody will feel shamed or shunned because they are demonstrating that they need help and that they need to look after their mental health. Even if it's not a physical problem that prevents them from doing the work, there's enough of a mental health challenge there that they need to take steps to tend to it, and that we want to be supportive of that as a whole.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation today. And if you like this podcast as much as I did, please, write a review for us on iTunes, share it on social media, and of course, go to the website and, look at the show notes and take advantage of all the resources. Till we meet again, have a wonderful, amazing week ahead.